A while ago I was discussing something about sickles, and I've been asked on feedback that I get as to how would I bring a sickle back that's been neglected? How would I renovate a sickle? And I give it some thought. I've got my sickle of my own, quite content with that. It's the light one, but it's used for cutting mostly grass, as you know. And I thought, well, I could do with the sickle, so I know what I'll do. I'll go onto eBay, and that's what I've been telling people to go. I'll go onto eBay and I'll buy a sickle. And I've been telling people at the same time, buy a second-hand sickle. And I've given some guidance points on what to look out for. But I get some people say, oh, I went to eBay and I bought a sickle and a stone, and you know, and I think that they would only cost £10 a lot or something, and I think that they're a bit of gumtree. But so what I done, I went and bought a sickle, and what I was looking out for was a sickle that had got plenty of life left in it, that was in good condition, and that's what I got. And this is the sickle that I bought, and I've renovated. This is it. That's the one that I bought, and I've renovated. Now then, because I've been doing other work, and it's all a bit bitty, I'm only doing things for a few minutes at a time, I made quite a few videos on what I was doing, the sickle as I was doing it, and unfortunately it's all got mixed up. So what I've done, I've cobbled it together in a bit of a mishmash, but all I'm trying to do is send it information. I'm not trying to make a movie out of it. I'm just trying to send you the information that I've got, my personal information if you don't take it, and that's what I've done. But it's a bit of a mishmash, so what I'm going to do today, or tonight actually, because it's about 9:30, or getting on by 9 o'clock, what I'm going to do today is give an introduction to that video. And the introduction will be quite long, because that in itself takes up a lot of time, so here we go. And this is the introduction to the bits of mishmash of video that I've got of actually renovating this sickle. Now then, where do we start? As I said, if you're looking for a sickle, look for an old one. You'll recognize old sickles after a while, and have a look out for it. Generally speaking, the harder the stuff it's got to cut in the way of gorse or brambles or things like that, as opposed to grass, then they're heavier and bigger, and they've got that slightly open curve, which I don't like, because I've been using mine totally for grass, you see, so I like that. So I seen one and I thought, right, now's my chance. It was a good sickle. Another thing you want to look for is that it's equal the width along here, because if it narrows towards the end, it means it's done a lot of work. But this is actually parallel looking at it on the video, on eBay, and also the handle is very good, no sign of woodworm, and you know that the tang of this is solid. This is one piece steel and goes down through the handle, and at the end it gets paned, knocked over to hold the handle on, and there's the actual knockover one that was put on at the time it was made. I think it was probably never used, but there we are. I got it at a good price, and I'm very satisfied with it. So that's what we've got. Now then, how would you bring that sickle? Let's talk first about the steel, because I want to re-emphasize this. It isn't steel. What we have originally was iron, you know, just iron. And they were making iron in parts of various parts of the world over various times. Mining iron, because iron ore is quite easy to see, and if you put it in a fire and get it hot enough in charcoal fire, you can melt it, and then you've got a metal called iron, and that's the most common metal on the planet, because there's a big chunk of it right in the middle of the earth. Now then, that iron was quite brittle and not very good. But they found after a while that if you what they called was puddled it, was muck it about, and when it's melting, trying to do it, and give it, they found it was better quality. And the reason for that is that the impurities in this iron, which is inbuilt in the iron, was gradually disappeared, and that was called puddling. And eventually, when it got to a certain refining process, it became called wrought iron. Now then, wrought iron, wrought is a W-R-O-U-G-H-T, wrought iron. Wrought is an Old English word meaning to work. And so therefore wrought iron means worked iron, or iron that has been worked. And now iron that has been fiddled with and puddled with, and most of the impurities gone out of it. So there's less than 1% of carbon, which is the biggest impurity, in the iron, and therefore it's called wrought iron. There was no steel then; it wasn't invented, and so they had this wrought iron, and that's what this is made of. This is made of wrought iron, although this might have been made up to 1973, because wrought iron was processed or made in the steelworks. Wrought iron was made up to, I think, last one in 1973 in north of England somewhere, but they don't make it anymore, as far as I know, unless they make it in India or something like that. And so there we are. So now then, losing my thread a bit, but that's it. Now then, the way that they make the blacksmiths, they get this wrought iron delivered to them, and most of that wrought iron that they get comes from old ships, the steel in old ships, because old ships, iron bottom things, was made with wrought iron. So there's a lot of wrought iron about in estuaries and things like that, anchor chains and things like that from old ships. And so they could salvage that, and that kept the wrought iron industry going purely on that. They don't make it anymore. So there. So what they've got is this wrought iron. It's got quite good characteristics in that wrought means work. You can work it, you can heat it, and you can hammer it, and it'll shape it. So that's a big advantage. Steel is much more difficult work, steel, but you can do it in a cottage industry if you like. Blacksmiths, I remember blacksmiths, when I was a kid, you could go to a blacksmith shop and you see them making something, making implements was quite specialised, but to be making something for farmers, even in the 1950s, I remember that very well. And so it could be worked. And what has happened with that is that the person who's making it got a length of wrought iron, which has probably come in lengths round or whatever, and you cut it up, and then he would shape it, and then he would bend it, and then he'd flatten it, and then he'd put this little curve in there, that little curl in there. And while he was doing that, he was heating it up and hammering it. Heating it up again and hammering it till it was almost gone off the red, and then heating it up and hammer it. He might hammer it 15 times, 16 times. Every time he hammered it, he was knocking the carbon and the impurities out of the steel. Now the beauty of your wrought iron is it's got a I can't think of the word. It develops a linear strength, and therefore it's quite advantageous for this work. And also by heating and hammering over many years, they found out how much heating and hammering it needed to get to just the right point at once for making a particular job, and one would be for making a sickle or a scythe. And when it comes to that point of heating and hammering, And I've seen them doing it years ago when I used to go into the blacksmith, be it heating and hammering, perhaps not making sickles, heating and hammering. You think, well, I wonder why he doesn't stop. It looks pretty good, but he'd be hammering away and heating and hammering. And then he'd be looking at the metal and looking at the temperature by the colour of the red. And then he'd just walk over to I don't know, with oil or water, and he'd plunge it into the water or the fluid. I think it was water. And what that done, it would set that metal at that type of what he wanted, and it would set it virtually in stone. It's fixed, and that's it. Now then, and therefore, you've got it just as you want it. Hard enough to do the job, not too hard so that you can't use a stone on it, and you know, and also it's hard enough to throw a burr and hold the burr, and that's what was wanted. So you've got a lot of advantages. The other thing is that wrought iron actually doesn't rust. That piece there, I cleaned that up. It hasn't rusted. This had gone rusted a bit because it does if it's the skin is taken off, but that was forged, and the forged mat is left, and that doesn't rust. I can think of an example. Oh well, steel came about, invention in 1856 or something like that. 1856 by Bessemer. He was a British engineer or scientist or whatever, but he invented the process of making on a Bessemer furnace. That's how I know the name, because they call them Bessemer furnaces, and that was 1856. And but wrought iron didn't die out by no means. It had its uses, and a lot of the balustrades in these fancy houses in America and in Paris and that are made out of wrought iron, same as this. Actually, the Eiffel Tower is made out of wrought iron, made out of almost entirely out of wrought iron, and that was made in 1886, which is 30 years after Bessemer invented steel. So it did have its process, but it's now dying out because, you know, with all these oxy-acetylene cutters, people are making fancy things out of steel. But that's it. So here we are. So now then, let's go on to the practical side. How did I turn this lump of stuff into a sickle that you see today? Because it was just rust down here, and it was all covered here, and the finish was the same color as that, and so it was obvious that it hadn't been used much, if any. So the way I done it, I'll just show you quickly, because obviously I talk too much and get on with it. But what I done, I got my trusty, let's have a look, what have we got? Yeah, there. Got my trusty V-blocks here, and we put them in there because the camera will show you the run up before I finish. And we put the sickle in here. This is before it was I'd worked on it. Put it in there like that, and I got it in there like that. Give it a tap, because if I don't, it'll waddle. But I can't find my hammer, so it'll not. No, don't worry. I just like to give them a tap, otherwise it sort of waggles like that. Do that, it tightens up. Tighten them a little bit more, and then what I done then, I got a piece of board like this, and I put it up there. And let's have a look. I put it up. I held it again with my knee against my metal bench. Push it up a little bit to tension it. Then put a G-clamp on there, like that. Let's just try that. And what that done, I can put another G-clamp on there, and what that does is it gives you, yeah, I'll get that one on without too much bother. Yeah, it gives you then a nice surface to work on that's not dangerous to you, and that's caught by the bottom of that stick. I hope you can see that. And just have a look. Yes, you can. Good. So there we are. So having got that, what I done, I should have done it a roundabout process, but what I'll do is I'll do it first. But normally I do the other side first, and I should have done that first. I'm getting ahead of myself. But let's just turn that around. But if you look here, what I've done on this side was I got something to go under the sickle like that, and it's all in the other video I made. And then I got the stone, my sharpening stone, on the rough side, and then I held that like that. I had a piece under there to make sure it was right, and then I rubbed all the rust off, because this had gone rusty, because the forged part had been exposed, and the wrought iron is here, and so around there. And then when I come to there, I turn that round and done that side. The important thing I want to say is two things I want to stress tonight, is that when you're doing this, it's got to be flat. That have I got one? Yeah. That face has got to be flat, for the simple reason that you're going to run your stone along it. When you're sharpening, you're going to run it, and if it's curved, you won't get to the burr, will you? So you've got to be flat. The way to keep it flat is when you're doing this, put your finger there, so you know it's flat. Put your thumb on this side, put your other fingers on that side, and then keep on that. Don't go like this and then like that. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. You'll do it, and then that's that. Now then, let's go back to this other operation that I was doing. I'm going to move the camera because I know it'll run out of time on me. And there we are. So we put that back in my little jig. Anything that holds something first securely, so you can work on it as a jig. And I won't get it as good as I had it before, for the simple reason that no, it's not too bad. There we are, that's pretty good. So, and this was all forged, all this colour, that was all forged, which is a good indication it had never been used, because it should have been like that. And what I done, I got my angle grinder, but not before. I also got a pair of gloves, goggles, which I put over my glasses, the goggles which fits over glasses, and some ear defenders, and I put them on. And then what I done, I got the angle grinder. And this is the angle grinder. I put the gloves on, and I put the all the safety gear on, and I put a very strong coat that comes down to my fingers, so I'm protecting myself. But I'm sufficiently knowledgeable and I've been at it long enough that I could take the guard off, because you wouldn't be able to use it without taking the guard off. And then what I done, I put it on there, and I'm doing that edge like that, putting it on so that when you've taken that off, and you haven't reduced that in any way, but you've taken off enough to form an edge which should be about, it's over 10 mil, it's about 16, 17 mil, something like that, perhaps 20 mil, and that's depending on the type of sickle, how thick it is, and that's what I done. Now then, I told you about the first thing, about keeping it flat, and that's important. This is even more important. It's when you're grinding this, people say if you've got a drill, a twist drill, and you're sharpening it and you haven't got any water and it turns blue, I've heard people say that's good for it because it made it harder. It hasn't, it's made it softer. It's what's called, it's annealed it. It's made it softer, it's ruined it. And the reason for that is that and you know that's what it does. You can't waste time on that. But if you're doing this, then you've got to be very, very careful not to glue the blade, because if you do, you're going to have a soft spot in your blade. Take your time, doesn't matter how long it takes, but do not glue the blade, because you're going to ruin what is in effect an antique. And so look out for it. And then I'll just switch that on and then just show you. It is plugged in, but I'm not gonna do any work with it. But you've got to remember when they kick. But if you go along on this side of the grinder, then all your sparks are coming out this way, and you got some control because you're coming along and it's not kicking. If you went along on this side, all the sparks are coming out all over the place. Instead of behind you, they come out in front of you. And the other thing is, it'll tend to kick a bit, you see. Whereas this, the rotation here is causing it, got more control. So you go along on the edge of there, and you go along, and you end up going all the way along. You will go up all the way along at the finish, because you'll go very lightly, and you'll be trying to make this is the final process. Now then, if the reason it turns blue at the front face is because this is generating heat by the sparks or by the friction, and therefore it is generating heat, and the heat is building up. Now further back here, the heat can go into the steel and cool, can't it? The heat. But at the very front face, because it's very narrow, the heat can't get away fast enough. So if you continue to make too much heat, then it'll turn blue. You buggered it. You've done it. Finished. But what you've got to do is come well within that heat process. Be aware that is as it gets thinner, and so therefore you come along like that, and what I was doing was, I'm sure it might show you, and I must look at some of these bits of videos that I chucked to coddle together and see what. But what I was doing is going like that and then coming back. Going like that and coming back, going like that, and each time after about 3 like that, I go on a bit further, and then I come back, and then after about 3, I go on a bit further, and then go on and coming back, because when you're going further, you're seeing that you've got the right angle, and then you come back, and then you can do that, you see, and then you can go a bit further still. And then after about 3 or 4, you can go another sort of inch or two, 25 or 50 mil, and then you come back and then you do it again, and that's the way you will do it. And you might have to do it more than once. You might have to do it 5 times. You might have to do it 10 times. Take your time. You're only going to get one chance at it. You muck it up. That's your problem. But you'll just spoil a very good sickle if you do. I hope you'll find a good one, and so that's it. And then towards the end, when you're coming towards the finish, you can go right the way around, like that, and then come up there in one dab, and you can do it again in one dab, and quite light, because you're moving, and the metal under the sickle hasn't got a chance to burn. But when it turns blue, you mean you're burning the metal. You're actually oxidizing the metal. You're burning it, as if you put it on a fire. And when you burn metal, it softens it. And that's it. So 2 things: flat with the stone underneath, when it's the other way up, flat with the stone, not like that, because you want it flat for when you're sickling. And the other thing is, do not burn the steel, because if you do, that's finished it. Just one point. You see there. This is, I've used this. I haven't been sitting in the drawer doing nothing. And see there, because I cleaned this, and you can see the crud on there. That little bit of crud, the dirt that you can't get off the sickles. And I found a way of getting it off. And that's it. Sif cream. I found it in my wife's kitchen, and and I'll just see if that will rise. But it's going to be on there a bit. But there you are. Even if you don't make yourself a sickle, perhaps you've got one, and you're pestered with this crud that is on the blade, and if you put that sift cream on, leave it for about 5 or 10 minutes, and rub it off and experiment with it. And I found that it will actually, I'll lift that on long enough, but it will actually lift the crud off. I haven't found anything that will compare with that. So there you are, you've got a bit of a tip, 3 tips tonight, and so that's it. So this is my, well, when this goes on, I'll have 40 videos on YouTube. I made more videos, but I've taken some off. So this will be my 40th video, and if you look at if you go into YouTube, tip on what you want to see, put Selectronify, which you'll see on my video. Type in Selectronify, and up will come all the videos. A little bit people interspersed between them, but they're all in that area, so you'll be able to see the 40 if you want to have a look. Right, that's it. I'm going to put this together now, and then I'm going to cobble. I'm on the second half of it. I'm going to put the bits that I've done, and I should have made more use of them. Some are missing, and others were badly made, but they will give you sufficient information for you to be able to, in my opinion, in my way, renovate a beautiful antique. Okay,